Begin the current Daf Mesechta Bava Metzia Daf Ches begins 7 lines down at the top of the Yamid, where the Gemara introduces a halachic concept based on the halacha of our Mishnah, this opening case of Shneimech's Metalis, where one of the cases we described was that each one is saying he found it, which the whole principle why we say that we split it is because, and we make them swear that they don't have less than half, is that maybe they both picked it up and therefore they acquired it together and they're going to divide it. From that, the Gemara is going to infer halachic principle. What is the case when someone picks up a Mציעא for his friend regarding the friend being kaina? The Gemara infers that from the halacha of our Mishnah. Throughout the entire world. So we're discussing today's daf is someone picks up a found object for his friend. Halacha is, do we say kana chaver, his friend acquires it? Now maybe it's based on the principle of a migui. What's the migui? Migui de zachal nafshei. Since the guy who's picking up the found object could really take it from himself, so since he could find it, take it from himself, so therefore he also could now, based on that, acquire it for his friend. The Gemara discusses regarding the case of a cheresh, when he finds something, it's only rabbinically his. So the question is, when he picks it up with another cheresh or with another pikech, what would the halacha be? On the Amud Beis, the Gemara discusses regarding rachul v'manig, which is the case of our Mishnah. If one guy is riding the animal, one guy is leading the animal, who's better? Which relates to Ma'asera regarding the holding onto the reins, of handing it over, and how it relates to halacha of klayim, when you're passive, when you're leading it or when you're just riding in it, would you violate the halacha of having a shar v'chamor yachtav for the halacha of klayim? So begin the current daf ches, 7 lines down at the top of the Yamid. We had said in the Mishnah, Shneimech's Metalis, this guy says, I found it. This guy says, I find it. So on that, we said, okay, that they're both going to acquire it, but Yachleiku, they're going to have to split it between them. And that, Amiram Bachame says, this tells us the following idea, meaning the Mishnah that said the two people that pick up a found object, they acquire it and they divide it. Now, when this guy picked it up, what was his intention when he was picking it up? Was that his friend should acquire half of it because he's getting half and his friend is getting half. What you could infer from this halacha is the following halachic principle. If someone picks up a found object for his friend, his friend acquires it. Meaning, again, it might not be that this is what happened. It might be that he picked up the whole thing, it might be the other one picked up the whole thing. But the halacha of the Mishnah of Yachleiku is based on the principle that must have been, that could be they both picked it up at the same time. And if they picked it up at the same time, what's happening? So that means to say, each one is picking up that the other guy should get half, and that's why the other guy is going to get half. Later on, the Gemara is going to ask, where exactly does Rambam infer that from the halacha of our Mishnah? Which case is he teaching us this? That necessarily that you find the principle of Bava Metzia Daf. But the Gemara says it's not so simple. But for illustrative purposes, this is what Rambam is saying, that, from our Mishnah you see that they both picked it up and they acquire in Yachleiku. Obviously, because you pick it up for your friend, he's going to acquire the half that you're picking up for him, and he's picking up for you. Why? So says the Gemara, that they give think to say, that the other guy cannot acquire it. So how are you telling me that the halach is going to be Yachleiku? No one should acquire it. What do you mean, why should no one acquire it? I thought they both picked it up at the same time. No, because Ti'asazu, it should be made this, meaning the half that you're picking up for him, you're picking up has nothing to do with him. You can't be koined for him. Let the half that you picked up should be like it's still on the floor. And let his part be like it's still on the ground. So neither one of you picked up. Neither one of you acquired it because he can't. If he can't be mezaka you, so then for you, in all practical purposes, like it's on the floor. So and therefore, says Rambam Chama, none of them should be acquiring it. Whoever wants to should be able to grab it away from both of them because no one picked up the whole thing. Right? That was the whole halacha of the Mishnah based on that idea that we're going to say Yachleiku. And they're both going to say, because maybe they both picked up together. And if they picked up together, that means no one acquired it. I love Shmami. No, rather we can infer that no. If If you pick up a found object for your friend, Kanach Haver acquires it. So you're picking up for him, he's picking up for you. So therefore, together in a partnership, you're both acquiring the whole thing, and therefore it's going to be Achloiku. So that's the source of the halacha of a Magbi Metzia L'Chaver, Kanach Haver. Now, Amar Rava disagrees necessarily with the principle. He says, the truth, I could tell you that when someone picks up a found object for his friend, his friend does not acquire it. Meaning, as Rashi explains, when the guy who picked it up did not have in mind to acquire it at all, you cannot just be mezaka your friend. Now, why wouldn't you be able to do that? So the Gemara later on Daf Yomi is going to explain, because this is what's called tefris labachayv b'makom shechab la'cherim. You can't do someone a favor that's going to be a liability with someone else. Someone else is not going to be able to get this object that you found that you're taking from. Someone else is going to lose out. Now, but then what do you do with the halacha of a Mishnah? When both of them pick up a found object that they do acquire it together, I thought you cannot be zoicha l'chaveroi. Any time it's different over here. What's the difference over here? There's a migui. Since he could merit it for himself, he's also going to be Zeichel friend. Meaning to say, here he also wants it. Since here he also wants it, so it's working through him. So yes, he could be Zeichel l'chaveroi. But if he wasn't trying to be koined at all and just for his friend, you can't do that, because then you're causing a loss to someone else. For yourself, you could. And once you could do it for yourself, you also can do it for the other person. But if not, just for the other person, then it wouldn't necessarily work. And says the Gemara Teda, you should know that even if we say that your friend cannot acquire it when you picked it up totally for your friend, but here in our Mishnah, where you picked it up for yourself and your friend, you will be koina, because of migui. I'll prove you this point. What's the proof? Because she'ilu amar l'shluchai. Imagine a guy tells his agent, say v'ganavli, go do me a favor. He tells his partner, go and steal from me. And v'ganavli, the guy steals. What's the halacha? Potter. The guy who sent him is going to be potter. He doesn't have to pay kefil for having being caught with a stolen object, because that we know the halacha is very clear. In shlichut v'avera. You don't say this agency. What? The guy who sent him. Because you don't say that what the shlich did is associated with the mishaleach. Only the shlich can be chayv, because this is what's known in halacha as divrei Rav divrei Talmud. When the master Hashem tells you something, and the student, meaning the person who's sending you, tells you, who do you listen to? You listen to Hashem. So we don't consider it shlichus. Now, but whereas b'shutrin sheganvu, when partners steal, and one guy went and took it out from, this is the way Rashi explains it. Tosfos explains it differently. Tosfos explains actually that both of them do it together. But Rashi explains that one guy took it out from the owner's possession for him and for his partner, as the Gemara says about Bava Metzia Daf and Chesem Abeis, chayav, and they both can be liable. Wait, my timer. Why would they both be liable? I thought ein shlichus va'avera. Oh, la mishum. I mean, the only say because there it's different. Migad zachal nafshe, since he is doing it for himself, zachal namel, so he could also do it for his friend. And yes, it will associate. Shema. No, we see there's a difference between when you're doing it just for the other person, when it won't work, and when you're doing it for yourself and for the other person, then it will work. So now, based on this principle, Amar Rava, he says, Hashta de Amrit, or the Girs of the Bach says, Hashta de Amri, now that we're saying, the Amrinon Migui, that we say this concept of Migui de Zachal Navshe, Zachal Namalachavre, that since it's going to work for yourself, it's going to work for someone else too, even though it wouldn't necessarily work just for the other person. So then I'll tell you the following case. Cheresh upikeach, a deaf mute and a regular sane person, shigbiu Metzia, that they pick up a found object together, they're both going to acquire the object. Now, even though halachically, the lifting up, the hagbah of the cheresh, is not a hagbah to acquire. It's only because of what's called darchi shalom, ways of peace, as the Mishnah teaches in Gittin up in the Testament Beis. Cheresh v'katan, there is halach of gezel only for darkei shalom. Even so, you're going to say the principle of migid zachal nafshe, meaning mitoich shekana cheresh, since the deaf mute acquires because of darchei shalom, but he acquires it, so kana bikeach. So although really it shouldn't work for the bikeach, because the hagbah of the cheresh is not a valid hagbah, but since it works for himself because darchei shalom, it will work for the other person, and then they'll acquire it together. So the Gemara doesn't like this, Bishlam Cherish Kan, I understand that the deaf mute could acquire because the Kamag Balei Bendas. The other half, the sane person is lifting it up for both of them. Now, the edge that the Cherish is picking up, for the Cherish himself, I understand it's going to work because that's the Darchei Shalom that we say that the Rabbana instituted that his Hagbah could work for himself. And the other end, the Bekeach, who's a Bendas, is picking up from him, he's covered on all sides. But regarding the Bekeach, how is he acquiring? The edge that the Cherish is picking up is like it's on the ground. Because the Hagbah of Cherish is not kaina. It's only because of Darchei Shalom. But that only works for himself. How could that work for the Bekeach? Bekeach doesn't have Darchei Shalom. So why when basically the Gemara is saying Migui shouldn't work over there? Because there's no Migui. Migui what? Migui that it works for the Cherish, it should work for the Bekeach. There's no such Migui. We do it for the Cherish because of Darchei Shalom. But in Halach, we don't view this as Hagbah. How does it work for the Bekeach? So Ella Emered, this is Gemara, you're right. To the contrary, you have to say Cherish Kana. You're right. Only the Cherish requires Bekeach loy Kana. The Bekeach will not acquire. So then the Gemara says, wait a second. Didn't Rabbah say that there's a Migui over here? Well, my Migui what type of Migui could you say over here? That you're saying that now that Rabbah said now that you're saying Migui, we're going to say Migui. But the Cherish, why does he acquire? To the contrary, the Bekeach doesn't acquire it for himself. To say that since he acquires for himself, he should acquire for the Cherish, because the Hagbah of the Bekeach is not even a Hagbah. So not only is the Bekeach not acquiring it, and then to the contrary, the Cherish also shouldn't acquire. So where's the Migui over here? Says the Gemara, Migui d'shnei charashin ba'al makanoi. We're saying since when there's two charashin, when there's two deaf mutes in general, they're both going to acquire. So Hainamikani, here also the Bekeach is going to acquire, because since it works with Charashin, it'll work for the Bekeach too, which Taisa doesn't understand. Maybe you don't say two Miguis. The base Charashin to be acquired, that's because the Miguis Zachanavsh Zachanam Chavre, who said it would then work for the Bekeach. That's what the Gemara is saying. So the Gemara says, really? Why would you say since it works with two Charashin, it would work with the Charashin and the Bekeach? Chaimai. Im Tim Tzalem, if you're going to say, in other words, even if you're going to say, even if you would say in general, when you pick up a found object for your friend acquires it, which we're not even working with in that paradigm, working based on the principle just of migui. But even if you said that a person could acquire, when would you say that? That's when you picked it up with the intention of the friend being acquiring it. But over here, when this pikeach, when this regular sane person is picking it up, he's really picking it up for himself. It's just that they're both grabbing it. At the same time that he picks it up, the Cherish picked it up. You tell me the Bekeach is not acquiring it. Lachrina makni? But for the Cherish it will work? What? Because generally by the Cherish, since two Charashin works for the Cherish, we can say it works for him also over here. When it doesn't even work for the Bekeach himself, because the picking up the Cherish is not even a valid picking up, how could it work for the Cherish if it's not working for the Bekeach himself? So this is the Gemara. No, you're right, it's the opposite of what we originally thought. It's a mitoich, which is like a migui. Mitoich shalai kana bekeach, to the contrary. Since the bekeach cannot acquire it because the Hagbah of Cherish is not Hagbah, like kana Cherish. So you're right, actually the Cherish also doesn't acquire it. But then the question is, if you're going to say, then why is it different than two deaf mutes that in general that the Cherish will acquire, even though really, halachically, the Hagbah of the other Cherish is not a Hagbah. So why is it really any less than the bekeach, which his Hagbah is not Hagbah, and there the Cherish is not going to acquire it? Because Hasam Tikin Rabbanan, there by two Charashin, two deaf mutes, Rabbanan instituted, the Le'asal and Tzuye, we don't want them to fight with the ones who are grabbing it away from them. So we say, two Charashin, okay, we're going to say that they could go ahead and acquire it. Hacham Eimer Amar, but over here, he's going to say, the Cherish, he's not going to fight with people, because he's going to say, Pekech Loikani, says the Bekech doesn't acquire. No ikni, you think I'm going to acquire? He's going to get it that he doesn't acquire and someone else could grab it away from him. He's not going to fight with him. He's not going to say, what are you picking on me, whatever, like why are you treating me differently? He's not going to say such a thing, and therefore that's why it's the opposite. We thought originally we were saying migui that it works, originally the version that we had said of Rav was that since the Cherish acquires, the Bekech acquires. Now we're saying the exact opposite. Since the Bikech does not acquire, so even the Cheresh is not going to acquire. Now, the Gemara asks on what we just said. Amalei Rab Acha Beredav Adal Rabashi says, "Diyuke the Rami Bachama Mehecha." We started off the Amid with Rami Bachama saying, "Oh, this tells us from our Mishnah, if someone that picks up a Mציעא l'chaveroi, his friend acquires it." And he says a svara. He says a svara. Why? But he was inferring it from the Mishnah. Which case of our Mishnah was he being medaik? This idea of Zayis Ameris. Where do you see this in our Mishnah? This concept of Hamagbi Mציעא l'chaveroi is kana chaveroi. So the Gemara starts from the beginning. Inem, if you're going to say mereisha from the first case of Shnai Mechs Metalis, two people holding on to a talis. That's not a raya. Hasam over there, hakamar kula shali, v'noak ba'ate kula. This guy is saying that it's all mine, I picked up the whole thing. V'ayam kula shali, v'noak ba'ate kula. He says, and the other guy says, all mine, I picked up the whole thing. So as Rashi explains, how is it said that this one's not going to acquire and this other guy's not going to acquire, and that you would think someone else could come and take it, unless if you said, that's not true. Every single guy's claiming, I picked it up. So there's no Hamagbi Mציעא l'chaveroi in the opening case of a Mishnah. What exactly is there to respond? In other words, I understand the guy who is holding on to the other hand, and he's making a claim just like him, saying, no, you didn't pick it up, I picked it up. So fine, that's why they have to be a chleikut, and they have to make a shvuah. But some other guy from the street, what's the claim he can make? How could he grab it away? Each one saying, I picked up the whole thing. You don't have a claim on that. So you cannot prove that, must be, because then someone else from the street should be able to grab it. It's not true. Each guy is claiming it's all mine. So that's not, you wouldn't be able to infer the halacha from the first case of the Mishnah. So okay, el mahad diktani. Rather, let's bring a raya from the next case of the Mishnah. The Mishnah then goes on and says, Zeh mekula shali v'zeh mekula shali. So you have first, Zeh mani mitzasiyah v'zeh mani mitzasiyah. That's one case. And then the Gemara says, as we already proved in the previous daf, which actually can be part of the Gemara's answer, that this guy says all mine, and this guy says it's all mine. Sulamali. Why do you need to say another case of Zeh mekula shali? You already said Zeh mani mitzasiyah. El Mishnah Yiserish Mamina, from the extra wording of the Mishnah, from the extra case, you can infer that it's teaching you Hamagbi Mציעא l'chaveroi, when someone picks up a found object for his friend, kan l'chaveroi, his friend acquires it, as Rashi explains, the Masel Mishnah Yisera. That's why we say yachleiku, because we say that they both picked it up at the same time, and it's like as if everyone is picking up for himself and for his friend, and therefore they're going to acquire it, because you don't know which one's lying, so that should be what's called mammon amat basafik. That should be money that's in doubt, and you should split it with a shvuah if that's what the halacha is, because you don't want everyone to go grab talis or shechaver like the Gemara said of Gimel. So that says Rashi, we already know that from the Reisha. Why would you? It's redundant. So that must be the reason why you're saying another case of Zemekulish is you want to teach me a different type of case. Oh, what type of case is that? Oh, well, we're both picking it up for each other. Oh, the fact that works. Oh, that's the principle. Says Gemara, no, it's not true. That's not an extra case. Well, Kim already explained on Daf Beis, the first Daf, we said Reisha b'Metzia, the first case talking about a Metzia, v'sev mekach memker. Second case talking about when there's a purchasing. So it wasn't a Mishnah. It's not an extra case to teach me this case of Mציעא l'chaveroi. It's not even talking about Metzia. It's talking about buying it from a seller. So the Gemara says, okay, let me say it. Rather, we'll learn that from the next case of the Mishnah. Zeh mekula shli, v'zeh mechatza shli. This guy says all mine. This guy says half mine. Now hasulamali. What do you need this for? Meaning, what? You can't figure out that, like Rashi said in the Mishnah, that when he's saying it's all mine and he's saying it's half mine, that the discussion is only on half and not on the whole thing. We understand that that's obviously basic math, that it's what they're discussing, that's what the discussion is going to be on. So proves the Gemara, Ella, Mishnah Yisera, rather, it must be from an extra case that Shemamina, what's the extra case talking about when you're talking about this case? It must be when someone picks up an item for his friend that their friend's going to acquire. He's saying, I picked up all, I picked up half, whatever it is. But obviously it's an extra case that teaches that. Says, it's not true. Who says to my buy a found object that maybe it's talking about by purchasing? No, if you're going to say, well, what's the necessity of teaching that? we already said a case of Mekach Memker. Says it was necessary. Why? So you would have thought this guy, you would have thought. One guy saying it's all mine, meaning I bought the whole thing. The other guy saying, no, half is mine, I bought half. You would think that Lahav Kamesha Aveda should be what has halachically considered as a guy who's returning a lost object. Meaning, from the fact that he could have said it's all mine, and saying half is mine, you're obviously telling the truth. And it would be, and therefore, Filipatu, he should be exempt from making a shvuah, because we don't suspect you, because you're obviously an honest person. Because why would you return this lost object? You could have kept it. Why are you saying half of it is mine? You could have said the whole thing is mine. And that's the chiddush in the Mishnah. No, this guy's being deceptive. Sava, he thinks if he says it's all mine, I'm going to have to swear. He said, I'll say this, I'll be like a guy who's returning a lost object, and I'll be exempt from an oath. Therefore, that's the chiddush that require him to swear as well. That's the chiddush in that case. So that's, again, we still don't have a source of an extra case of the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, okay, Elmaha. Let's go on to the next case of the Mishnah. We have two people riding on an animal. Again, he says it's all mine, he says all mine. What's the halacha? This guy swears doesn't have less than half, this guy swears doesn't have less than half, and it's yachleiku. So the Gemara, Hasul Lamali, Gunag Shain, a talis, a chamar, like why do we have to keep on saying more cases about the same idea, about splitting something in half? There must be an extra case to teach us, a case where they picked it up together at the same time, and it's teaching us that they're both going to acquire. You can't have someone else from the street come and grab it away and says, none of you acquired it, because when you did it together, it was like the other guy's half was on the floor. Must be no, because maybe it's no, it's not true. That's not an extra case. Maybe the Mishnah is teaching us simply the Reichiv Namekani. It's teaching us that the guy who's riding also could acquire the lost donkey the same way. Now, meaning, even though that he's not doing Mashiach, he's not pulling the animal, he's not moving it from its place, because he's not leading it with his feet, that's the chiddush that you could acquire an animal simply by riding it, even though he's not causing it to move. So, again, that's not an extra case. So El Meseifa says, no, we know it from the end of the Mishnah. The Mishnah ends off, Bizman shehin moedin. Now, if they both admit, or there's witnesses that they acquired it simultaneous, then there's no point making an oath, because we know definitively, either through their admission or through testimony, that they both acquired it at the same time. Now, what's the case talking about? If it's talking about that was through purchasing, do I have to say that when two people buy something, they have to split it without a shavua? I mean, this happens all the time. That partners buy stuff together, and we're admitting, and there's witnesses, and what would be the chiddush in saying yechlik b'lo shavua? B'Metzia. Rather, must be talking about that they found it together, and they're admitting we found it together, and there's witnesses that they found it together. You still have to let us know that someone else cannot go ahead and grab it, and that they split it. Because Shema Mina, what it's teaching us is that when you pick up a found object for your friend, he could acquire it. That's the source of Rameh Bachama. Which Rav would tell you, which we already quoted before, he says no. In general, when you're not intending to be zeichen it yourself at all, your friend cannot acquire it. The Mishnah Yisera of the Mishnah is coming to teach us that yes, when you pick up the Mציעא for yourself and your friend, then also your friend acquires. But not because of it's because of the migui. Since the Zachal Navshei, since he's trying to get it for himself, he could also get it for his friend. But just for the other guy? Says Rabbi, that you cannot infer from the Mishnah Yisera of our Mishnah. That was not what our Mishnah would be talking about. We'd be talking about only as the case is talking about when both of them are trying to get it, then it works to the principle of migui. That was the source of Rabbi Chama, and that was the reinterpretation of Rabbi that no, it's limited to a case of migui, and it was from the last case of the Mishnah. And then we had, again, Rabbi's discussion regarding would we say the migui regarding cheresh and pekech. We said not. Said since the pekech is not going to acquire it, so the cheresh also is not going to acquire it. Now, relating back to the halacha of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yosef says, Amali Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda told me, as we continue to Talmud Beis, Shamet minei demar Shmuel tarti. I heard from the master Shmuel two halachas. I heard the halacha of rachuv, of riding on an animal, and I also heard from him umanig, regarding leading an animal. Now, Chad, regarding one of them, he told me, Kani, that you will acquire. Chad, and the other one he told me that loy Kani, that you will not acquire. But, says Rabbi Yehuda, I don't know which is which. That was the halacha. Says the Gemara, okay, what's the case talking about? When he says Rachab and Manig, if he means just riding itself, that no one else is leading the animal with him, and someone else from the street comes and grabs it from him in front of us, and he pulls it, he does Mashiach to acquire it. And also, Umanig Luchudei, and when it's just leading an animal, and no one is riding the animal with him, and someone else from the street comes and grabs it away from him in front of us to acquire it. And on that is what Shmuel was saying by one of them, that yes, either the one who was riding or the one who was leading, but it was only one. He does not acquire it. And whoever grabs it away could actually keep it, the one who grabbed it away. And on that, Rabbi Yehuda is wondering which one is which. Says, really? That he had a suffix regarding? Is that really possible? But Manig Luchudei, if all there was that one guy was leading the animal, Mika Manda Amalaikani, is there anyone who says that the guy who's leading the animal is not acquiring? That's Mashiach. That the Mishnah says in Kedushin clearly, that which Tais discusses, although that there is an opinion that holds actually not, it's only Ragbah, but we're asking from a Stamas Nitin Kedushin, that the Mishnah says explicitly that animals acquire with Mashiach. So what would Rabbi Yehuda be? I don't know, what did Shmuel tell me? He told me Roichav and he told me Manig, and I'm not sure, one of them he says Kaina, one of them is not Kaina. I mean, if we're talking about independence, says the Gemara, how could you have had a Havamina that you didn't know which one? Manig is clearly Kaina an animal, because Manig is leading it, is Mashiach. So that's clear that you would be Kaina. So rather, it's most definitely that Shmuel said regarding one of them, the loy Kani, that you're not going to acquire, must be Rachav Hudei Mema. It must be regarding riding that you could possibly say that he holds Mashiach is when the animal picks up its foot and its leg. As the Gemara says, riding, you didn't cause it to move at all. So what's your Havamina? If you're talking about independent, it's clear that Manig would be the one that you're kind of, and maybe the one that not would be Rachav. So the Gemara says, right.
So you could see anything that you make the behemoth move, you actually being mechamer, you actually causes it.
Right.
That you're not going with that.
Well, we're not talking about mechamer. We're talking about either riding or.
Riding is even more than.
But riding is not causing it to. You're not causing it to move. You're just sitting on it, and then it moves. But you're not causing it to move. The Gemara is going to talk about a possibility about causing it to move. But for now, you're just sitting on it. You're not doing anything.
There's something you're holding on to.
Right, the Gemara is going to talk about that in a second. You're not necessarily holding on to anything either. And even if you're holding on, you're not causing it to move. Mashiach is when you're causing it to move. So the Gemara is saying, well, so what was Rabbi Yehuda not sure about? So the Gemara says, if he's not sure, must be must be the question that he had was, both of them are in front of us. One guy's riding, one guy's leading, and the Purim story obviously comes to mind, the Haman Rasha, and there's the Mordechai Tzaddik. One guy's leading and one guy's riding. Shmuel says one of them is going to acquire it, and the other one will not acquire it. And that Rabbi Yehuda wasn't sure, when they're both here, which one was the one that's better that Shmuel says is going to acquire. What's the halacha? What's the question? So the Gemara explains the question. On the one end, Rachav Adav, you're going to say the guy's riding is better. The toughest ba. He is holding on to the animal. When we say Mashiach is kaina, is when no one is riding the animal. But if someone's riding the animal, a guy is pulling it, doing Mashiach, you cannot acquire it because the guy who's reichiv is actually holding on to the animal, which Taisa discussed exactly what does it mean that one who's riding is holding on to it. He says, don't say that he's holding on to it with his feet, or this that he's sitting on it, because that's not considered tough isba. Rather, it must be, what does it mean he's holding on to it, which like you pointed out from the picture that we have over here, that he's toughest b'meisera. The fact that he's holding on to the reins is called tough isba, as we're going to see shortly in the Gemara, that's what it's referring to. So that's what Taisa says, that holding on to the reins is what he's holding on to it. So on that effect, we'll say that the guy who is riding it is better. Like the Mamanagodev says, like, no, maybe the guy's leading it is better because the Aslam Achmaseh, because the animal goes because of it, And that's the greater kinyan, when you cause an animal to go. So that was Shmuel's question. When you have one guy riding, one guy leading, who's going to be the one that's kind and who's going to be the one that's not kind? So Rabbi Yosef, he says, Rabbi Yehuda said to me that, okay, that was Shmuel's question, and I don't know which one, but he says, Nech Zianan. We could resolve from Shmuel's teaching himself elsewhere, which one he said is going to be kind and which one not. Why? Did none. So a very interesting parallel. There's a Mishnah in Klayim that says, Hamanig. If someone is leading an ox and a donkey together, which we know that's the prohibition of Klayim, there's many different types of prohibited mixtures. One of them is Leisachrish B'shor B'chamor Yachtav. You're not allowed to plow with an ox and a donkey together. So if someone is leading the cow and the donkey as they're plowing, so the guy's going to get 39 lashes. Now, what happens if a guy, very comfortably here, sitting in his wagon, and it's being led by an ox and a donkey together? So the Tanakama, he gets lashes because he is using an ox and a donkey together. Remeir says, no, the guy who's sitting in the wagon is not liable because, like Rashi says, he holds that the guy didn't do anything. He's just passively sitting as a passenger. That doesn't cause him to violate of Shar Chamor Yachtav. Now, but says the Gemara, from the fact that Shmuel, he inverted that Mishnah, and he taught the other way around. He didn't want it to be Remeir. He says, no, it's the Chachamim who said that the one that's sitting in the wagon is exempt. Ooh, Shmami, no, what you can infer from that if Shmuel's inverting it, that obviously Shmuel holds, that just riding, just sitting, you didn't do anything. Because like Rashi explains, we know the principle of Yochav Barab Malacha Karab. When you have a machlokes between the Chachamim and the one opinion, you go like the Chachamim. So why did Shmuel invert the opinion? Because he wanted that the halacha should be that when you're just sitting, that you'll be pater. Remeir says that, but he didn't want that to be halacha, so he said, no, that was the Chachamim. So obviously, Shmuel holds, just sitting is not doing anything. You didn't affect anything. Oh, so b'choshkin yochab b'makamanig, for sure in our case of when one guy's riding and one guy's pulling, this guy didn't do anything. He's passive. He's active. So, from just like you see over here that Shmuel holds that the guy who's sitting is not going to violate, but in the fact that he's saying it's the Chum, not Remeir, who holds this opinion, so then, I could prove that Shmuel himself, when you would talk about this case of the guy leading and the guy riding, that he would say the guy leading is the guy who's kind of, and the guy's riding is not doing anything. However, Amalei Abayla Rav Yosef, that was what Rav Yosef wanted to say in the name of Yehuda. But Abai said to Rav Yosef, he was a student of Rav Yosef, he says, there were many times that you told us this sugya, this topic, you told us this idea of Nech Zianan, of let's see. You never told us, like in the name of Yehuda, you said in your name, that you wanted to resolve this doubt of Rav Yehuda. So Amalei, so Rav Yosef said to him, Ivr, the truth is, no, it was Rav Yehuda who told me Nech Zianan. And Rav Yosef at one point forgot his learning. He says, he says, you reminded me also that I told him after he wanted to resolve it from Shmuel's own teaching from the Halach of Klayim, I told him, nah, what are you talking about? How is the master resolving Rachuv mi Yoshev? How are you resolving the halacha of riding a donkey from sitting, or horse, from sitting in a wagon? You're telling me that Shmuel holds that sitting in a wagon is not going to be affecting anything. So if you want to tell me the same thing when you're riding on the horse, on the donkey, is also not going to be a kinyan, they're not the same thing. Why? Because Yoshe, when the guy's sitting in the wagon, loy tavis b'meisera. This is what Taisa was proving, that's the idea of the reichiv, that he's toughest, but it means when the guy's sitting here, he's not holding on to no reins. Rachiv, the guy who's riding on the horse, tavis b'meisera. He's holding on to that rope that's attached to the animal, and that's what makes it how you pull the animal. So they're not the same thing. So maybe here Shmuel holds it's right, it's nothing, but here Shmuel would hold it is something.
Is this the Iker principle of Mashiach, that you, by the animal or riding in Talmud, or is it a chefetz? Because my question is, by this being a part that is a rider, absolutely is doing command to the animal.
No, the Reichiv is not doing anything.
That Metzia is not.
We're going to talk about it in a second that, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Your Metzia you're talking about is something else. We're going to talk about that when the guy makes it move. But if a guy is just sitting, he's not doing anything. He's just holding on to the animal. He's holding on to the reins. So the Gemara is saying, but even that itself makes it different than the case of Shmuel over here, where he's just sitting, that maybe when he's just Yoshev, he's doing nothing. But maybe Reichiv is doing something. He's holding on to the reins. So V'amali, on that, Rabbi Yosef says that after I asked this question to him, Rabbi Yehuda responded, and he said, no, Rabbi Shmuel Damar Tavayu, both Rabbi Shmuel, they say, Meiseicha loikani. It's not true. The holding on to the reins is not a kinyan for Metzia until you make it move and it picks up its hand and its foot. Now, Rashi points out in the Remaskal Meiseicha and the Kohen, he says, even though by a sale it actually does acquire, the Mishnah teaches in Kedusha Chavayim Beis, a behema gas, a large animal that we're talking about, is niknas b'mesira, when you give it over, which is you take the meisera, you take the reins and you hand it over, that actually is a kinyan. Says Rashi regarding a metzia, there you're not kinda. As our own sugi is going to end up explaining, that there's a fundamental difference between the metzia and the mechira. Mechira, the reins, handing over the reins, which actually is a term that we have, handing over the reins is actually a kinyan. But when there's no mechira, no seller, no giver, and you're just holding the reins from Metzia, that would not be a kinyan. So therefore, don't tell me that they're different because, here is holding the reins and here is not, because that Rav and Shmuel both say that's not significant for a kinyan, and therefore that would not help you at all. Now this was all one version. The Gemara just brings another version. The others say that Rabbi Yisrael himself said this pshat of Nech Zianan. It wasn't in the name of Rabbi Yehuda. Amalei Abai Rabbi Yisrael, Abai asked Rabbi Yisrael directly, how could you, Rabbi Yosef, answer and compare and say, I know which is Shmuel's halacha, which one's kind of, which one's not. Because I see Shmuel by the halacha of sitting in the wagon, that he holds it's not doing anything. So the guy's riding is also just sitting, also not doing anything. But says Abai straight to Rabbi Yosef, what do you mean? Yosef Tavas b'Meisecha. It's the same thing, just another version, slightly different. That sitting, he's not holding on to any reins. Rachav Tavas b'Meisecha, the guy's riding, he's holding on to the reins. On that Amalei, on that Rabbi Yosef responded, he says, Hachetani Idi, this is how Idi taught a brayso, it's the name of a sage, Meiseicha lekani. Just holding on to the reins is not a kinyan, and therefore that's not relevant, and therefore I can still prove that Shmuel would hold that is the one whose manig is going to acquire, and the one who's roichiv is not going to be kaina, again, b'makam manig. Now, Idmanami, so too we learned, Amar B'chelba Amar Rav Huna, Meiseicha, so when it's mechaveiroi, and this is very important differentiation, when it's a purchase from your friend, then kana, then holding the reins is going to acquire for you. But b'metziah, when it's a found ownerless object, u'b'nechse ager, when a convert dies and he has no inheritors, which is also a hefker item, where the halacha is, as the Gemara tells us in Bava Metzia Daf Membeis, whoever's quickly is first to grab it gets the rights to it, they're like kani. They're grabbing a hold of the reins is not going to acquire it. Says Gemara, my lashon meisira. What's this terminology of meisira, of the reins? Why is it called that? So Amar Rabbi says, Idi Asberli, Idi explained it to me, Adam hamoiser davar lechaveri. It's like a person who hands over the reins, hands over the wheel, hands over it to his friend, but you're giving it over to a lekeach. You're handing it over. That's when it's going to have halacha kinyan. Because the Gemara explains. Bishlam and Mechaber, can I understand that when you're getting it from someone else, the holding of the reins is going to be an acquisition to come muscle lechaveri. His friend's handing it over, the reins to him. That's a kinyan. But by a found object or by the assets of a ger that there's no yarshim, who's handing it over to him that it should be a kinyan? It doesn't have that significance of being handed over, and therefore just grabbing a hold of that is not an act of a kinyan, and therefore there it's not going to be a kinyan. And that's what we're saying, that the guy who's riding and holding onto Meseira doesn't do anything for us because it's from Metzia, it's from a hefker thing, doesn't give you any rights, and the manik is going to get it, and not the reichim. The Gemara says, wait a second, how can you say this? It contradicts Allah of Mishnah. We learned in the Mishnah, we said that if there's two people riding an animal, etc., that so the Gemara says, man, who's a Tana of Mishnah? In other words, Reb Meir, if you say the Mishnah is going like Reb Meir, that he said that if you're sitting in a wagon, you're going to get lashes, which, like we said, just being a passive rider is going to be a significant act. And then you want to say our Mishnah is like Reb Meir, which the halacha would not follow like him. But hashta yeshiv kani, if you're telling me that according to a mayor, just sitting in the wagon, you get 40 lashes, it means it's a significant act you would acquire that way. So racham mibai, do I have to say, why did the Mishnah have to tell me the case of Reichav Nagab Behema, which we said already in Amin Alf? We said, what do we need this case for? We already spoke about a talis. What do you have to do? We said, I'll tell you why, because we have to tell you Reichav is kaina. Reichav is kaina? I need to teach you that? If it's going like a mayor, even just sitting is kaina. Reichav, which is even a little bit more, of course you're going to acquire. El lav rabbanan. Obviously, then the Mishnah must be going like the Rabbanan. Ooh, so like Rabbanan, Shemamina, then you could infer that yes, only by the case of sitting in a wagon for the halacha of a klayim of shar and the chamar together, that's where the hold you're going to be pater. But rachav, and if you're riding, you obviously see from the Mishnah that kani you do acquire. Oh, that refutes Rabbi Yehuda. He wanted to compare reichiv from yeshiv. We see like Abaya. We say that they're not the same. We say that although they hold by yeshiv, bekarain, you're pater, but rachiv, riding the animal, will be kaina. So Gemara said, no, it's not a raya. My skin, this is what you brought up before. You know what the Mishnah is talking about? The guy who's riding the animal? He's not just sitting. He's not just holding onto the reins. But manig beraglav. He's causing the animal to move. He's spurring it on with his feet. Ah, that's why rachiv is going to be kaina. Because he's kaina with meshicha. When he kicks it with his feet, come on, let's go. Get up. It's going because of him. The way horse riders do, that they kick it. When you say the Metzias, not so simple. Gemara doesn't take anything for granted. When it's just a passive reichiv, no, Kabbalah Chama hold that you're not kaina. Maybe that is the same like Yeshiv. Maybe it is like what Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Yisrael had said. This case of our Mishnah that you're going to be kaina is not just reichiv. It's his manig beraglam. That's what's going to be kaina. So Gemara says, if that's the case, haina manig. So wait a second. So that's the same thing as leading the animal. In other words, why does the Mishnah tell us about reichiv being kaina? There's nothing that it's teaching us. It should have just said, or both of them are being manigit. So the Gemara, we want to teach it, trei gavni manig. We want to tell two cases of leading an animal. Had we only said that they split it when there's two manhigim, two people leading it, we wouldn't have known. We would have said, Ma'odatem, what would you say, Rachab Adav, that I would say the guy who's riding the animal is better. The hamanig v'tafis, because not only is he leading it, but he's also holding onto the reins. So the case that we had regarding Rachav and Manig, we needed to say that they split it. Because even though we're saying that the guy who's Reichiv is not just Reichiv, he's also Manig Baraglav, and that's why they split it. But maybe if a guy was only Reichiv, only the Manig would get it, as we're trying to say. We're trying to say the same as Yoshev, is that you didn't do anything, and like Shmuel said, only the Manig is going to get it, not the Reichiv. Our Mishnah says they split it. Oh, that's because he's Reichiv, he's Manig Baraglav, he's kicking it also. So that's why they're both Manig. So why don't you just talk about two Manigim? No. Because we only spoke about two Manigim, I would think, but in the case of Rachav Baraglav, Manig Baraglav, where he's not only being Manigid, but he's also being toughest, he's holding on to the reins, you would have thought that he's better than him. And that actually only the Reichiv is going to get it and not the Manig. Kamash Malan, that's why we have to say that even this case too, Rachav Makam Manig, if he's Manig Baraglav, that they're going to split it equally. Thank you to any time for hosting us.